It's no secret that pathing is the most highly sought after feature we need for the Teapot. While we wait for proper paths, and they're totally coming. I mean, MiHoYo's listening. Alright, no, I'm not taking copium, you're taking copium. The community's found a little bit of a workaround like this, or this, using pine tables and stone benches. But what if I told you there's a better way? A way that still uses those same furnishings, but clips them into the ground and making them feel like true, genuine paths. So the issue with using pine tables and stone benches on the ground as is that they still sit pretty high up. For stuff like this pine bench boardwalk surrounding this house, the height of the pine benches cuts off the house's door and makes the doorknob sit awkwardly at child's knees. You also can't just run up onto the paths. You kind of just jog in place, and you have to jump up onto the path, which can be a little awkward, especially depending on your build and your layout. This is where this new tech comes in. We lower the height of the benches and tables so that they're clipped partially into the ground. That way they're more flush with the ground and they look way more convincing as actual paths. To do it, all you'll need is a rocky landform, and you can use any of these 6. I like the big square units because they give the most wiggle room, but use whatever fits with your build. If you look around the outside edges of the landform, you'll see that they all slope inwards at a bevel, and that bevel extends all the way around. Even though the bevel's elevation is lower than the main surface of the landform, here, I'll place a bench in the middle for comparison, you can still place objects on the downward slope. If I carefully put it into place, I gotta make sure to line up the bench right at the edge. You can see how now, this bench has gone down about half of its original height. Now, all we gotta do is make sure the settings for snapping furnishings into place is enabled, and voila! Clip additional benches onto this first lowered one, and you have yourself a bona fide path. This works just as well with the pine tables as it does with the stone benches, but just keep in mind that since the pine tables are a little taller than the stone benches, they won't be as flush to the ground as the stone benches are. The difference is still a huge upgrade, and to me at least they still work great as paths. One of my favorite combos is making a stone path and then clipping those new square Inazuma lanterns into the edges to make this really pretty lit up path. Again, make sure that the snap setting is enabled, and you'll see that the top of the lantern sits perfectly in line with the benches. I also love framing the paths with other furnishings, like these flower boxes to hide the legs. These things also get the extra buff of acting like stairs to easily climb onto the path without needing to jump on. Plus, they just look really pretty. You can also use those really long, pretty horizontal shrubs, but really, the only limit is your creativity. Anything snaps to the paths. And I'm sure there's a bunch of combos that I haven't even thought of that also look really cool. The only major downside to using these paths, and I guess this technique in general, is how much load it takes up. The new optimization in 2.1 helps with this a little bit because they reduce the amount of load that duplicate items take up in one single sub area. But if you do a lot of pathing, it'll still eat through your limit. Right now I have 30 stone benches and it barely covers any space. Another downside is that, as of right now, you have to use a landform to use this tech. You can't clip them into the ground without a bevel. This means that you have to make your build around propping everything up on landforms, which can look a little awkward since the landforms don't have any grass on them. So you'll probably want to find some way to use shrubs and other grasses to fill in all that empty space. One workaround to this is clipping trees into the bottom of the landforms to fill in a bunch of that empty space without using up a lot of the limit that putting a bunch of individual shrubs would take up, but just be warned. If you get too close, the tree leaves do disappear, so I think this is best used for landforms where you can see them while looking down, but don't really plan on walking through them as a part of the build. Despite a couple limitations this tech introduces, there's still a ton of really cool builds it opens up through the sheer virtue of just having good looking paths. So, if this helped you at all, hitting the video with a like and even subscribing to the channel really does a lot to help me out. Did you know that you can clip any furnishing into any other furnishing just by shaking the fuck out of them? I post weekly Teapot guides just like this, and have a fully commentated time-lapse coming out soon that'll show off this tech, and a bunch of Leeway and Inazuma stuff in full force. I also do a bunch of non-Teapot topical essay videos, so if any of that suits your fancy, welcome aboard. And either way, thanks a ton for watching. Go out there, experiment with all this tech, make some crazy builds, and I'll see you for that juicy time-lapse.